Hey guys, this is Loman02. It's been a long time since I've done like a tour de force video of 100 card Singleton. I've done some deck building, but what I want to do here is actually a deck testing session. So I will not be testing, well, I'll be playing my decks, but I will not be per se testing them. A lot of these are decently tuned lists. RobZdar is actually testing a list, and I kind of want to go through a testing session and kind of provide some of the takeaways and, some thoughts on the format in general. This first matchup is pretty clear by the hand that I am holding here in this game 1 against my opponent RobZdar's unknown deck that he is currently testing to diversify his deck archetypes in the format. Without knowing what Rob's on, Rob tends to be an active player. As you can see by his Naya-based avatar there, he likes casting some critters and doing some active things. So, I can generally go in on an assumption that he'll probably be playing a creature-based deck. But looking at this hand, what do I think? This hand's fine. I'm on the draw. It's a little land-heavy. If I don't draw a land, I should be okay, though, because I have a Deathblade Elite to kill any mana dork. I've got Savannah Lions to lock up with a sword at some point. The hand's okay. So I end up keeping it. Don't know. Plays a Dryad Arbor, and he... He makes the cardinal sin, much like folks have decried this card, this version of the card, the From the Vault Realms version of Dryad Arbor, because he accidentally plays it thinking it's a forest in his hand and was attempting to cast a spell there. So, feel a little bad for him. Get the standard version of it. This card is kind of a little bit, silly. Evidently didn't have another land, though, or didn't have another forest land. So we go ahead and attack with the Deathblade Elite, block, or force the block with the Provoke on the dork. He plays out a Pattern of Rebirth, which is a little bit spooky, because if he's playing like a Pattern Hulk deck, then we could very easily get blown out by that, as a non-basic comes into play tapped. Play out Savannah Lions, play out Marshall. Don't attack here because I don't really want to run into a Hulk. So I guess when I say Hulk, let me just stop to explain that, because the game's kind of going rapidly. Although the White Weenie deck, if it wins, will tend to win fast. So, Pattern of Rebirth, if you're not familiar with the card, I'll pull it up right quick before we go a little bit further, because it is kind of an old, weird card. I'm just playing a bunch of white cards that pretty much do one thing really well, attack and accrue tempo very well, like Thalia, Banalish Marshal, Imposing Sovereign, which is basically one half of Thalia. And then I've got Gideon of Standard Rotations Past, just a dumb card. An Anthem effect himself, and also just a big threat. So, Pattern of Rebirth is actually a pretty cool card. It's actually like a very old, I think it's older than the Natural Order. But you enchant a creature with this. If the creature dies, then you just go find any creature you want. It's probably a little better in some ways than Natural Order, because you can find anything with it, like an Emrakul, an Ulamog, whatever, Gristlebrand. But the typical combo in 100 card Singleton and Canadian Highlander is to utilize this card with Academy Rector and a Sacrifice Outlet to generally find Protean Hulk, leaving the Sacrifice Outlet in play to conduct an infinite loop, either looping Murderous Redcap or Siege Rhino to kill your opponent. So I don't really want to attack into this, even though I know whatever this blocks, whatever this is killed by will spawn a creature that comes into play tapped, so it's not going to have immediate effect. It could also be something like Elish Norn or Massacre Worm, which would also be equally horrific. So I'm going to go try and drop the preview window here. So I don't attack. What I want to do is actually set up a turn where I basically am very, very close to winning on the turn I do it, i.e. can turn off the Ancient Tomb. Draw on a Benevolent Bodyguard, play out Benevolent Bodyguard as opposed to Sword, turn on Gideon, play out the Sword just for lulz, give Gideon protection from green because Dryad Arbor is green. It doesn't say it on the card here, but if you actually open it up on the original card, it says Dryad Arbor is a green creature card. They activate their Mistress Factory, block the first striker so the creature will come into play. Before combat is resolved, they have a Kozilek. Kozilek is irrelevant. It is attacking Gideon at this point, so I go ahead and sacrifice Gideon. Thus, I'll take 0 damage. Sacrifice the Gideon, the Flagstones of Troikir, and I believe 2 other lands. Get a Plains land for my troubles. They're at 1 life, and they go ahead and pack it in there by conducting suicide, or in formal terms, seppuku, by Ancient Tomb. So, quick pause, guys. We'll go on to Game 2. Guys, back. So, we don't really know what they're on. They're on a deck that runs green, but I don't know if they're per se like a mono green deck. This hand is very dubious, but I really don't want to go to 5. I probably should have mulliganed, but with the Scry, I'm a little greedier. I guess I do go to 5. And I don't see a land on top. I bottom Scry a Smuggler's Copter. So actually, I did what I thought I should have done, which is mulligan that last hand. I thought I kept it for some reason. Miss on land here. Unfortunate, but you're not going to generally mulligan past 5. I don't think it's generally right. especially not on an aggressive deck where you really need your lands. So I go ahead and start playing my creatures here. I play Leonin Arbiter to stop like natural order or a pattern of rebirth or something along those lines. But now it appears we know more clearly what our opponent's on, which is a mono green ramp deck of sorts. So I still think Leonin Arbiter was probably right. We get attacked for 5 here. I could block, but I opt to leave this thing in play, hit my land, play out the Mirran Crusader, which is a phenomenal blocker against all of these threats. However, we do have to remember that this is 5/5 is actually not green. It's actually colorless. It does not make the land a green 5/5 creature. Draw pretty well, and manage to get Athalia's Lieutenant to make the Mirran Crusader essentially a 6-power attacker, which can get through every single one of their threats. Send the core Skyfisher at the Nissa, get stunted growth, but it doesn't really matter. We have enough on board to win right now. And we're not really casting many spells out of our hand anyways. I play Athalia out because it's going to pump the Athalia's Lieutenant as well as make any big spell more expensive. They play out Regal Force, but the Mirran Crusader on its own is unblockable and a lethal threat on the following turn. So, Rob is currently testing an active green ramp deck, and we got to see kind of the matchup between it and White Weenie here, or Death and Taxes, I like to call this list. The White Weenie decks don't tend to run cards like Leonin Arbiter is often, because the card is kind of just a bad threat in and of itself. It's just a very hateful, effective card at stopping certain strategies like natural order, like crop rotation. Green actually has a significant number of tutors in it, more than you'd think, that it actually can get after. I think is still great in this matchup. So quick pause, we'll go on to the next game we play. There's going to be quite a few games, so you guys will get to see a lot of different archetypes that I'll be playing in the format, but you'll be seeing a lot of the green deck. Alright guys, back for game 2 of our testing session with RobZdar. We're going to be playing Grixis this time around. This hand looks acceptable. So when I'm trying to do this, I'm trying not to just, I'm playing each of these first games like I'm in the dark. I don't try to keep a specific hand. This hand's really not great against green because it doesn't have any removal. It has only counter spells, and if they get ahead early, it's not going to be as good, but I do keep it because I think it's a good enough hand in the dark, quote-unquote. Play out my fetch land here because I do want an untapped land to play Mana Leak or Miscalculation here. They go ahead and play a natural order. There's a debate here on whether I want to use Miscalc or the Spell Pierce. I don't think it's Mana Leak here. I actually opt to save the Miscalc just in case I get the opportunity to cycle it. So here I actually do end up using it. It could have been possibly more correct just to use Mana Leak there so I could cycle Miscalc later, but they're getting high enough up on mana that I think if I wanted to use the Miscalc at a later point in time as a counterspell, it's going to lose a lot of utility. Whereas Mana Leak probably has 1 to 2 more turns of shelf life until it kind of goes fallow. Draw into Burst Lightning, which is fine removal for like Mana Dorks. I'm just going to leave up the Grim Lavamancer here and start lifing my opponent with the Grim. They play on Nissa. I go ahead, this is a pretty easy Undermine. Essentially get him for 5 damage on this turn cycle with the Grim plus the Undermine here, getting rid of the Nissa. Opponent's down to 2 cards, has probably more lands than they need. They play a Primeval Bounty. I just go ahead and counter this because this card can gain them a lot of life, and I'm going to try to out-tempo them at this point and just kind of counter most of the spells they play and just slowly kill them by 1,000 cuts with the Grim Lavamancer because really it's the only threat I have that I can also leave up counter magic and also utilize. I am going to kill this thing, just not quite yet. So I go ahead and send a Burst Lightning to the face. It is my only removal spell, but it's also 4 damage. Well, correction, it's really almost 6 damage if I pay an extra kicker of 1 mana with the Grim Lavamancer. Opponent, I believe, just copies. I was going to say, I think they Convoke here, possibly, with a Court of Calling, but they do not. I draw a Demonic Tutor. I debate on using it here, but I go to second main and actually do end up using it, and my opponent just packs it into the Demonic Tutor on the stack. Quick pause, guys. Back for game 2. Alright, guys, we are back. And this hand is acceptable. It's not the best, but it does have a Kolaghan's Command for removal. What it is lacking right now is either black or red mana, as I don't really want to use a Skulling Tarn to get a Badlands, but I will if I have to. But really it needs one or the other types of lands to really succeed, but it has a Brainstorm, and that kind of ties the hand together, so I end up keeping it here. I have a Mana Drain now, which is actually quite strong, but unfortunately my opponent has a quite good... Oh, correction, they just play an Arbor Elf on this turn. I have the decision on whether I want to save the Brainstorm is the most powerful quote-unquote sorcery in this format, or if I want to expend it on my opponent's end step there. I expend it on my opponent's end step because I think it's very important to leave up mana drain here. Unfortunately, my opponent has Vexing Shusher, which is just like a massive beating. Because I could mana drain it to make 2 mana on the following turn, but I'm not really doing anything that significant with it. So I go ahead and pass the turn here. The plan is to try to end step Kolaghan's Command their Vexing Shusher, but unfortunately they play Yavimaya Hollow, which just pretty much completely wrecks me. But I do get the 3 mana off the Nissa. I go for it there because I'm just too behind right now to actually sit back and just try to play the counter game, especially against an opponent whose mana is developing with an onboard Vexing Shusher. Draw into a tapped land at this point. I play out my Young Pyromancer. Go ahead and fetch here with the intent to play Kolaghan's Command, knocking out the Vexing Shusher, if I'm not mistaken. Yes. Get rid of that while I can, and then I actually fetch, giving myself exactly enough mana to cast the Gurmag Angler, to try to get some counter swings in the tempo. My fear is that Yavimaya Hollow is actually going to put enough pressure on me that they're just going to be able to block infinitely with Yavimaya Hollow, and it's only 2 mana on a pretty sizable mana situation. They play Primeval Titan, which is pretty much probably going to be game over because now they have a pretty much unbeatable land combo unless I Mise Wasteland or a bounce spell this turn, of which there are like basically 3 options that can do that. There's a Wasteland, literally, there's Cryptic Command, and there is Mystic Confluence. Fortunately, I'm tapped out, and my opponent's Natural Order here just breaks my back. Bless me. Doing far more than lethal damage off a Greater Hoof Behemoth off the top, or off the Natural Order. Alright guys, quick pause, and we'll be back for the concluding game of match 2. Alright guys, back. This hand is acceptable. It has a fatal push for early interaction. Now it really needs to hit lands, so if it misses on lands, I'm going to be in a lot of trouble here. Opponent plays out an Arbor Elf. I go ahead and actually play out the Temple of Deceit because I'm looking for red mana at this point so I can utilize the Fall. Toxic Deluge is a quite strong pickup. Opponent plays out Mishra's Factory, and they could definitely leverage that just to kind of to threaten me. Basically not. Well, I'm not doing much because my deck's not that active. Unfortunately, I draw a Dust Bowl, and Dust Bowl is a huge time beating. I just dropped the Strix because it's very important that I make my land drops here. And if they want to continue Dust Bowl, ideally we're going to be able to, slowly accrue mana advantage. But the bad news for us is they have Azusa Lost but Seeking. And this card is pretty significant, especially if they're on a sizable in-hand mana situation, because they're going to be playing 3 lands a turn. They again have Yavimaya Hollow, which is pretty big here. I do go ahead and block, because if they have like a 6-drop, I don't want them to cast it right now. I'd rather keep them off of that. They do go ahead and regenerate. I don't think it's a big deal that I lose the Strix there. The Strix is really not going to kill anything. I do go ahead and Cryptic Command this, drawing a card and countering the spell, because I have a sizable amount of counters, and I want to be able to do that on their turn. I actually could go for a Jace the Mind Sculptor here, but I think it's better just to leave up Mystic Confluence and get a little deeper in the deck and counter whatever they play. So we do go ahead and counter this. I believe Bounce and Draw, which is pretty powerful. It's going to force them to replay that. I don't think it's like hugely powerful, but they're probably out of lands in hand, and they probably don't want to really replay a 3-drop that attacks for 1. I go ahead and fall them here and knock out a Garruk and a Defense of the Heart, so we know they still have the Azusa and whatever they draw for the turn. They go ahead and I believe they attack us with I believe the Factory, and then show us. Actually, they don't even play Azusa this turn. They just go ahead and attack. So they go ahead and attack here after destroying one of our lands. What we go ahead and do, and they play out a Fyndhorn Elves, which is a draw for the turn. We go ahead and play out a Jace the Mind Sculptor here, looking at the top of our deck and bottom an island. They go ahead and play out a Courser of Crewfix, activate the Factory, and do not attack. Attack only the Jace with the Mishra's Factory, and then play out the Azusa back down to 0 cards with a draw of Sylvan Library on top. At this point, I go ahead and Toxic Deluge and leave up a lot of counter magic. I do counter the Sylvan Library because this card will allow them to leverage their life as a card resource, which is going to eventually overwhelm us, or possibly overwhelm us with Jace. But we have an active Jace and 5 counters. They go ahead and pack it in here. They don't really feel like using the Mishra's Factory to try to fight Jace. Jace is just, eventually going to probably beat it because I have enough lands in play, and they're on 0 cards to my 3 counter spells. So probably okay. The only issue I'm going to run into here is that Yavimaya Hollow until removed is going to be problematic because all of my kill spells are basically negligible. But I think a pretty dominant position, and they tend to agree, and they go ahead and pack it in there against Grixis midrange. Alright guys, quick pause, and we'll go on to match 3. Alright guys, back, and in this one we're going to be playing 4-color Scape Shift. This hand is suitable. It has a Farseek, it has Secure Tri-Builder, and it has the mana to cast all of it. And they go ahead and play turn 1 Greens and Zenith, and put into play a Dryad Arbor. Pretty good first turn. Have a Rishadan Port, which is significantly annoying, because if I don't draw another land here, then I'm going to be kind of stuck. So they do go ahead and tap this down. Unfortunately, I don't draw a land here for my following turn, and they have a Wasteland, which puts me even more significantly behind. Luckily for me, I do draw into a land this turn, and it's possible that if I draw a land the following turn, I may be able to cast out one of my spells. I do go ahead and find a land here. I feel like I have to. They unfortunately have Dust Bowl as well. Play on a Primeval Titan and get the Dark Depths combo. I do wait to see what I draw for the turn because there's a possibility that I can Toxic Deluge away the board or Maelstrom Pulse solely the Primeval Titan and then use Mystical Tutor to get Cryptic Command to bounce the Dark Depths or Repeal to bounce the Dark Depths. So I'm not per se dead, but I'm looking quite dead. Their hand was very powerful this game. They go ahead and Dust Bowl me once here, which we figure was probably a very strong possibility. I do find Repeal because I'm short on mana at this point. And ideally, if they forget to port me, I could possibly cast a Secure Tri-Builder out. Unfortunately, they're representing enough mana to activate the Thespian stage to clone the Dark Depths at that point, so I can't tap out for the Secure Tri-Builder. They go ahead and fetch even more lands off the Myriad Landscape. Very powerful 2-for-1 land. Kill my breeding pool. I'm down to 2 lands in a Scape Shift deck that requires, requires 7 to 8 lands to win with. In this position, it'd be 7, corrections 8 to do 21. Unfortunately, here we have to pack it in though, and we go on to game 2. So quick pause, guys. We'll be right back. Alright guys, back, and we are here for round 2 of match 3 against Mono Green Ramp. Go ahead and lead on an island here. This hand looks promising. It's got a Demonic Tutor. What it is lacking is black mana, but Kodama's Reach should be able to fix that for us. Fortunately, my opponent, again, has a very quick start. They're going to crop rotation for Gaia's Cradle here, which is kind of a given. They play on a Fauna Shaman, which is very spooky, considering they essentially have 7 mana in play. Very scary, because they could just play on a Primeval Titan next turn and set up the same combo, basically on their turn 3. I do go ahead and Farseek here, finding the Watery Grave. They play on a Nissa. Luckily for us, they don't evidently have another creature. They get a secondary tap on the Gaia's Cradle, which is very powerful, and they're down to 1 card in hand by turn 3. So an 100-card Singleton, this is a very, very fast start, and going to be very difficult for us to beat. So the reason we got the Watery Grave is because the setup here is going to be go for a Demonic Tutor, find Toxic Deluge. Unfortunately, Perish will not kill the Gaia's Cradle. Go ahead and just Toxic Deluge the board. And now what we're kind of hoping for is to find either a way to deal with the Nissa or a way to deal with the Forest. Specifically, Fatal Push is kind of what I'm looking for. I don't think I tapped incorrectly there because I was kind of looking for Fatal Push. Unfortunately, the only card we could have taken that would have kept us alive was Wall of Blossoms to draw us a little further in the deck. Of course, I looked, and we did not find it. Now, if we were able to deal with Nissa on our turn there via Factor Fiction or via Draw Step, or if we'd find a way to deal with the Forest, I think it puts us in much better stead because it gives us an additional turn of blocks with the Lumbering Falls, and we actually weren't that far off from just using a Scape Shift to stay alive, i.e. we Scape Shift just to kill the Nissa or the land. Actually, we could kill the land and the Nissa with a Scape Shift there because it would be 6 plus 9. That's 15. We'd be at 18 damage total, so we could do 3 to them plus kill both their things. The issue then would become we need to find a way to win, although with them on 3 cards and no lands in play and no threat, we possibly could have gotten there. But unfortunately, this is the end of match 3, Scape Shift versus Mono Green Ramp. So we'll go on to game 4 here, guys. Quick pause, and we'll be right back. Alright, guys, back. And this time we play with Azorius Miracles. Again, this is not a great hand against them, but again, I'm trying to play it like I'm in the dark. Against creature-based decks, you oftentimes want to have 1 to 2 white sources or the ability to find 1 to 2 white sources. But this hand's fine in the dark. It has, it's very good against control. It has, two pieces of good counter magic, well, three pieces of good counter magic now. One card that transmutes into Search for Kanta, which is very good against control. They play out their two creatures here. I find a Caracas, which is good for me because it allows me to, get rid of any problem permanents. Unfortunately, they have a very aggressively fast start. And on turn 3 here, we see a Carnage Tyrant, which is an uncounterable spell. I could mana drain this to just get a ton of mana. I'm not going to get it, obviously, but I opt not to. What I need to find at this point is a Wrath of God effect or a moat. I do find Preordain. Go ahead and Preordain here. Find the moat, actually, of all things. Bottom the other island. Play out my island and leave up the mana drain mana. Likely try to transmute, muddle the mixture into something that'll help me find a plains next turn. I do go ahead and drain the Plow Under because that would just force me to lose the game. Take 8 damage here down to 11 and am likely decently dead next turn. So I have 5 mana floating. I do end up playing my land out here because I figured that I'm going to want an additional blue source in play. I do not find a white mana source off the Impulse, so I find Jace instead. Play the Oblivion Ring out, get rid of 2 of their mana. They play an Oracle of Moldiah, finding nothing off the top. Well, finding a Scrib Ranger that we know about now. We have to take 7 down to 4 here. I do go ahead and draw for the turn, flip, ditch the Academy Runes, target Impulse, cast Impulse again. Unfortunately, still fail to find an untapped white source and concede the game going into game 2. Alright guys, quick break and we'll be right back. Alright, so this is game 2. This is a very interesting hand. It has Terminus already in hand, which is not generally great because this deck ideally wants to just cast it for 1 white mana. However, it has a Portent and a Prohibit, and we are going to be on the play this time because we lost the first game. So I have to keep this. Portent is decently powerful, and it's decently likely that we'll find a way to shuffle Terminus back in, and or we can at least slow roll it with cards like Prohibit to kind of slow down the opponent so that we can get to 6 mana off of this hand, which already has 4, cast the Terminus for full asking price, and likely get a lot of cards with it. I do go ahead and play a Polluted Delta here, just actually find an island because I don't want to get wastelanded on turn 1. I actually keep this pile. I believe I bottom the Maze of Ith, then the Mystical Tutor, then the Memory Lapse. They do play on a Jiraga Tree Speaker, which is generally fine by me. I'm probably going to Memory Lapse anything they do here if they do anything. They attack with their Jiraga, which is generally fine by me. I guess they want to play around point removal on Jiraga when they pump him up. I do go ahead and top the Mana Dork and get rid of the Jiraga there. I do Prohibit the Sylvan Carrier, takes I'm just biding for time. I go ahead and Mystical Tutor here for Treasure Cruise, play the Wasteland, their Treetop Village, tap out for the full, tap out. End up drawing pretty poorly, though. I draw Land, Entreat, and Toxic Deluge, which is, basically they're all uncastable spells, but they don't per se know that. At this point, if I were them, I would be assuming that I had, 2 counter spells or so, maybe even some Wraths, because my mana is very well fixed. Go for an acidic slime here. I can't have my lands getting blown up, especially with 2 full asking price miracles in my hand. I do go ahead and tap here. This is actually a mind game. I'm trying to make my opponent think, hey, I have a threat, but I also have counter magic, and I debated it, and I didn't opt to play my threat. I couldn't really play a threat. I could play 1/4/4 out for a bazillion mana. At this point, I could play out 2 4/4s, but I opted instead just to blow up their elves. Unfortunately, they have a cool trick play here and end up Court of Calling to find, I believe, the Fauna Shaman to search for better creatures. I believe after draw step, they go ahead and find, they get rid of a Kozilek, shuffling the cards in their graveyard back into their deck, and end up finding, what is it here? A Mistcutter Hydrus. They get him for 3 damage because Mistcutter has haste, cannot be countered, and protection from blue, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, it basically hoses blue. But we have Terminus in hand, and we pay the full asking price for it and just get rid of my opponent's entire board with them on 2 cards. They go ahead and play a Life Crafter's Bestiary, which is actually a very strong card. Find a Noble Hierarch here and pass it back to me. I draw a land for the turn. I go ahead and tap out with the exception of 1 land to make, I believe, 2 Angels here. The hope is that we can fade a draw step off of the Life Crafter's Bestiary, possible card draw. The one thing about mono green is that a lot of they're going to have bombs, but the general quality of their top deck is going to be a little bit less than a lot of the other aggro decks. The same could be said of control decks, but because they play more lands. But in general, right now, I feel very comfortable with Cryptic Command up. They do actually mise very well here. I believe they bottom topped and find a Hornet Queen. I just go ahead and Cryptic Command this, and they go ahead and call it the game. They probably could have seen another draw step, but because I drew Preordain, I have my next draw step plus a look at up to 3 different cards with Preordain, putting 2 to the bottom, maybe drawing 1. I'm probably going to find a way to interact with them and probably lock up, a 2-turn clock that I've got, lock this game up. So anyways, guys, quick pause, and we'll go to Game 3 in Match 4 against RobZdar on Mono Green Ramp. Alright, guys, back. That first hand was unkeepable. Didn't have mana sources to play. They play an Elvish Mystic out. I draw very well for my turn and draw a white mana source. Play out an Engineered Explosives on 1 because I kind of want to tech them here. I do go ahead and blow it up here, hoping that they'll play 1 to 2 more 1-drops out, and I can Toxic Deluge them on the following turn. Instead, they just attack and do nothing else. So I go ahead and play out the Sunken Hollow, and I believe just Toxic Deluge here, dropping them down to just 2 lands plus Dark Depths, which doesn't really not much of anything. They end up not playing anything else at this point. I do have Dismiss now, which is quite good. I Personal Tutor for a Treasure Cruise because I'm kind of hoping to mana drain whatever they do, and use the mana plus the cards in my graveyard to cast it. They end up doing nothing yet again. I drew Drawn to Treasure Cruise. Pretty happy with that card right now, but I do need to get either more mana or more cards in graveyard to actually use it and still leave up counter magic on my next turn. Draw to another island, which is great because this deck just is a very mana-hungry deck, and it needs to continually hit land drops to kind of feed itself. They go ahead and just chip an ice counter off the Dark Depths. Probably not going to get there. I'll probably eventually find an answer to it. They cast an Eternal Witness. I do go ahead and just go ahead and mana drain this. They play a Guttural Response. I go ahead and absorb this. And this is kind of the death knell because now I'm going to have 3 additional mana, and I draw into a Wasteland, which is kind of the answer I needed to eventually stop that Dark Depths. Try to get rid of as many cards as I can out of the graveyard, but I do want to leave Drain in there because I think Drain's very powerful in this matchup. They kill my Black Source, but drop down a land. I draw Mystic Confluence, which is quite powerful. They go ahead and play a Garruk. I counter Garruk, drawing 2 and forcing them to pay 3, which they cannot. Draw into Logic Knot and Preordain. Right now, we're basically just trying to look for a way to win the game. I do play Jace out here. I do minus Jace. I just use the Preordain here because I know I'm going to be tapping out regardless. I take the Moat here because I think the Moat is close to unbeatable if I get an untap step. They go ahead and activate, oblige, and kill the Jace. This also puts them in a position where if they want to do something on their turn, it's not likely it's going to resolve. This will obviously resolve. Or it's likely that it will resolve, but it's going to be less mana if they go for it. I fetch for a Tundra here, which is obviously Dust Bowl bait. Play out the Moat, leaving 2 basics untapped so that I can't get Dust Bowl locked off of casting a counterspell. Have Force Spike for the Garruk Color Beast, which is an extremely powerful card if you've not played against this one before. It just finds bazillions of creatures. Look at the top 5 cards and put all creatures revealed this way into your hand. And you put a green creature card from your hand out of the battlefield. Not a lot of folks play Progenitus anymore, and to be honest, I don't know why, because I think the card is exceedingly powerful. I do go ahead and Mystical Tutor here, I believe, Finding Entreat, and then I go ahead and condescend this. Looking at my top 2, I already know what one of them is. Draw into the Entreat the Angels with Force of Will back up here, which I've just kind of been slowly setting up. Cast Entreat for 4 Angels, I want to say, which is a 2-turn clock. They go ahead and try to slam, I believe, a Hornet Queen again, and I have Force of Will, and that prompts the concession and the end of game 4 here. Alright, guys, quick pause. We'll be on to game 5. Alright, guys, back. I believe this time we are playing Oath. Yeah, this is my Oath list. It has cool snow-covered lands in it. Go ahead and play on the Cephalid Coliseum. There's a possibility that I want to spell Pierce something on turn 1, but not very likely. More than likely, they're just going to play a 1-drop Mana Dork. Draw into a Muddle the Mixture. The one issue with this hand is it does not have double blue. So Muddle is not getting transmuted into Oath anytime soon, although it could be. They play on a Jiraga. I do go ahead and actually condescend their Jiraga, and then I kind of make fun of them a little bit, some tongue-in-cheek about attacking with their elf before casting their spell. They play on a tapped land. I draw into Bayou. I know my next card is Counterspell, which is not exceedingly exciting. But I did not bottom it because I figured I had a little bit of time against this draw that they have. It looks like their draw is a little bit slow. They don't play anything there, and I also know that if I hit any other land drop, I'm going to be able to cast Dark Petition, so I'm pretty much going to cast Memory Lapse against almost anything here, especially Azusa, because I don't think Azusa is going to be great for them. If they draw it again, it's just a 1-power attacker. And draw into Mana Drain, again, another double blue spell, so kind of getting punished here for our keep. Any land would be good, though, because now we have Spell Mastery on Dark Petition. We can do numerous things to include playing Oath out or, getting a Toxic Deluge or whatever. We random into the Oath and just play the Oath, and, I give them the dumb because Oath is kind of scary, and in this deck it is quite busted. This is a 2-creature Oath, so I'm going to find either an Emrakul or I'm going to find Runescar Demon, and there is a Dragon's Breath in this deck, so either one of them could possibly have haste. At this point, we find Runescar Demon, which allows us to tutor. I do not equip or attach the aura to it from my graveyard because I want Emrakul to have haste next turn. We do run the gamut here because if we do have Emrakul as one of our last 2 cards, we'll just lose the game. But the chances of that are pretty low. I do go ahead and Mana Drain this Gentleman because it's going to allow me to cast more spells next turn if I need to. I go ahead and Oath of Druids. Believe find the Emrakul is card number 4 from the bottom of my library. Have 3 cards remaining. Attach the Dragon's Breath, and I'm going to go for an attack here. They will be able to sacrifice down to block with the Scrib Ranger, but I have enough cards left in my library that it's not likely they're going to be able to stop me here. Of note, they will get a free creature this turn. There are not enough cards left in my deck, and I did the quick math and checked to see if I could Dark Petition into a removal spell. Unfortunately, I could not here. So I'm going to just go ahead and attack, get blocked by the Scrib Sprite after they sacrifice every single other permanent on their board, and yeah, that's game. So quick pause, guys, and we'll go to game number 2 of Oath versus Mono Green Ramp. Alright, guys, game 2 in match 6, I want to say. Opponent plays out turn 1, Everson's Pilgrim. This draw is moderate. It's got a Life from the Loam, it's got a fetch land, it's got some potential to draw a lot of cards, and if it sees something good like a Wrath effect, it should be pretty solid. Find a crop rotation here. Go ahead and crop rotation into a fetch land, I believe Windswept Heath, finding Tropical Island, and then casting Life from the Loam to get back 3 lands, discarding the Glacial Chasm. I think I make a player here. I think I should have saved Glacial Chasm and discarded Island here. The issue is going to be next turn when I go to cast Treasure Cruise plus Legacy or Latinam's Legacy. It's going to be very difficult for. I'm going to have to if I want to cast both, which I'm going to want to do for mana efficiency. Exile the Glacial Chasm, and I think Glacial Chasm could have possibly led to a win here. Glacial Chasm does require Loam plus Fast Bond or Exploration to really work effectively against their deck, though. They cast down a Carnage Tyrant here and beat down. I really needed to find a Wrath effect there. If I had, I probably win the game. Or I probably can win the game. I go ahead and fetch, kill the Jiraga Tree Speaker, kill the Regal Force, so I'm not dead on the following turn. They go ahead and cast out Dork plus Eternal Witness plus attack for a bunch. Put me to 2. When they go ahead and Wasteland there, I just go ahead and concede. I take a look and then I concede. I'm pretty sure there's nothing in my deck that's going to do it there. I don't have like Sickening Dreams or like some other random card like that. Wildfire. This is not really a red deck. They can get me out of this, and the Hexproof clause on the Carnage Tyrant is an issue regardless. So like not even a card like Wildfire, which is actually technically targeted, would do it. So anyways, guys, we'll go in a quick pause, and we'll go to Game 3 and the conclusion of round number 6 in this testing series. Alright, guys, back, and this hand is perfect. We're on the play, which makes a turn 2 Oath pretty much the real deal. They play on a Forest, do not play another creature card, which kind of stinks, but I'm not going to lose the opportunity just to slam an Oath here. It's not very likely they can deal with it on 2 mana, and by next turn I should have the ability to, at a minimum, feign counter magic. So I do go ahead and Wasteland it because I drew a Nature's Lore. I go ahead and find a Breeding Pool with Nature's Lore, put it into play untapped, Ponder, find Life in the Loam, and Mystical Tutor, or correction, Merchant Scroll, which can find Mystical Tutor to find like Beast Within or something like that to actually get some, to get the combo online. I go ahead and Life from the Loam, finding the lands, and pretend to leave up Counter Magic. I actually don't cast the Merchant Scroll here because I couldn't cast the follow-on card, which would be Mystical Tutor in the time horizon to actually activate Oath. So I kind of wanted it to come as a surprise, and I also wanted to kind of feign like I had Counter Magic. Go ahead and fetch again here, find a Bayou. I'm up to 5 lands, and now I do actually have Counter Magic up, and I also have Impulse available. They go ahead and Thespian Stage here. It's an interesting trick. The reason I didn't try to Wasteland them, although I could have done it 2 turns ago, is because they can actually copy a basic land and then stifle, for lack of better terms, the Wasteland. But I also didn't think it was that high value of a play here. They unfortunately find Scavenging Ooze, which should get rid of Life from the Loam. But what I'm able to do here is actually a trick play. I actually don't care if Scavenging Ooze stays in play. I just cast Mystical Confluence to draw 3 cards, draw the Loam back, protecting it from Scavenging Ooze. Draw into the Emrakul, but they don't know that. All they know is that I have a silly RuneScar Demon, which I know I'm going to hit at this point. And they just go ahead and pack it in as soon as that happens. We do find Dragon's Breath, and we did find Brainstorm, and Jace is still in deck. So what we'd end up finding with this guy is Jace, and then put the Emrakul back into our deck. So that we could actually utilize it next turn. And we actually also have Fatal Push to boot. So there is that. Actually, we could use Jace, put the Emrakul back in our deck, and actually, no. The best play here, so we're at 7 cards. The best play here is to play out Jace, bounce the RuneScar Demon, go to discard, discard the Emrakul, and then shuffle back in the whole library. And then we'd have RuneScar Demon in hand, but we'd have Emrakul in deck. That may be the line we go with, because it also allows us to leave up Fatal Push on their turn. So anyways, we had this pretty well locked up, and this is a conclusion to round 6. We'll go on to round 7 here momentarily. Alright guys, unfortunately we missed the first little snippet. I did have to mulligan to 6 here. I'm playing Scapeshift again. I feel like I kind of got a raw deal in that first game. Opponent had a pretty good draw against what we were up to, which is basically just, deny my mana and play, just some stuff and kill me. This deck actually is not that fragile to like Wastelands and Blood Moons and stuff like that, because it actually has a significant amount of basics due to all the, Kodama's reaches it runs. This is a very strong hand, though. Have great mana development. I'm able to kind of interact with their creatures. Their Search for Tomorrow comes off stack here, and they're not really developing that well at the moment. And our Lightning Bolt does help kind of, cement that as well. They do find a Rishadan Port off the top, and I know they're going to go for some mana removal on the following turn with Acidic Slime. I do go ahead and, at this point, get rid of their Dryad Arbor, which I kill with the Bolt. Cast Dark Petition, floating 3 black, finding Skyshroud Claim, finding Bayou with my fetch, Skyshroud Claim for, I believe, Breeding Pool and Forest here, put it into play untapped, cast Farseek, find the Watery Grave, and they're going to go ahead and blow up one of my lands, but I'm at 8 lands right now, so any land draw off the top is going to be lethal. I do go ahead and exile the land they just blew up to make red mana, so I have 4 colors for the domain, or the converge mechanic on Bring to Light, which is going to find Scapeshift, or correction, I find Scapeshift, exile all of these, and do 21 damage to my opponent for the game win in game 1 of round 7, I want to say. Okay, guys, quick pause, and we'll be back for the next game in this match set. Alright guys, back, and this is a great hand. It's got plenty of mana, it's got, some cool value cards, got Electrolyze now, got an Impulse to find whatever we may need. So I'm pretty happy with it. Opponent goes ahead and plays on a Wall of Roots here, which is going to be a difficult card to remove, but I think I'm fine with that. We are sideboarded now. One of the interesting things is we actually do sideboard Perish in this deck. So basically the plan that we went into it with is that we just remove all our creatures, because this deck doesn't need its creatures to win. It just has creatures in there to like randomly gain life and block and stuff like that against the really aggressive decks. But their deck's not really aggressive. It's almost like kind of like playing against like Tron. Like, if it gets its mana down, like, it works really well, and if it does not, it generally tends to struggle. Go ahead and blow up the Channeler Initiate to cycle the card. End up finding Scapeshift, which is actually very fortuitous, because that gives us, the win con that we are going to need. Our mana is not developing as rapidly as our Game 1. Our Game 1 hand was just bonkers. This hand is more average, although it has not ramped whatsoever yet. I play out the Nissa here, find a forest, play out the Bolt, kill the Mana Dork. I actually think it's more relevant than the Scavenging Ooze. This deck doesn't really use the graveyard as a resource, although you see a hand here where it actually is a little more relevant, because we have Deathrite Shaman, Eternal Witness, and Pulse of Barasa. Go ahead and take the damage here. I do not block. They played out a Tender Shoot Dryad. Draw very well for the turn and draw into Perish. I don't really care about my own Nissa. It's a good card, but I don't need it here. I'm going to go ahead and Perish, and then what I'll end up doing is playing on a Deathrite Shaman, which is essentially like making a land drop for the turn. And on the following turn, likely Eternal Witness back one of the fetch lands, fetch with it, and then cast Pulse of Barasa. And at that point, we would be at 7 lands with the Deathrite Shaman. Deathrite Shaman can exile 1 instant card from any graveyard, do 2 down to 17, and 7 lands, 18-point hit from the Scape Shift in a 2-turn cycle, with them on 1 card and essentially 3 mana available, given they don't have any creatures off of Gaia's Cradle. So they go ahead and pack it in here. The second time around with Scape Shift, which is the only repeat matchup you'll see in this litany of testing, goes significantly better. And by the way, look at that sick Rebecca Guai art on this card, Perish. Just awesome art. Anyways, guys, quick pause, and we'll be right back with round number 8. Alright, guys, back. So I tell Rob I'm going to go Fair Magic this time, so I'm playing straight up Red Deck Wins. I go ahead and mulligan that first hand because it's going to have some mana development issues. This hand is not. Draw very well for the turn and draw Vexing Devil right in the time horizon you really want the card. Basically, you want to turn 1 or turn 2, or you don't want to see it ever. But it does some work here and gets 4 points of pretty much 1 card free damage in. Ball Lightning, so we're going to have to set that up, but I think it's going to be pretty strong. I do cast out the Burning Tree Emissary just for mana efficiency, because I think it's going to be important that I maximize my use of mana, especially playing a deck like Red Deck Wins, where mana efficiency tends to be very important. So we're kind of trying to fish here. My opponent is tapped down at this point because they went ahead and cracked their Myriad Landscape and Wild Growth. I do get in basically another hit with the 6 points. Opponent does get a Vine Mare. I go ahead and play out my land. I pretend I'm going to cast something. I don't. I'm going to leave up the Flame Javelin here because I want to put them down to 1. I don't block here. I would rather have as many threats as they have to consider blocking as I can. They play on a Carnage Tyrant on turn 5, which is decently quick, especially considering they missed a land drop this turn with Dark Depths. I go ahead and Javelin their face, draw a Factory for the turn, play out a 1/1, which is going to be the card that actually cinches the game up, and put them exactly to 0. Alright, guys, quick pause, and we'll go on to Game 2 of Red Deck Wins versus Mono Green Ramp. Alright, guys, unfortunately I had to mulligan the first hand. It only had 1 land and had a lot of 3 drops. This hand is not much better. I do play out my Vexing Devil here, kind of hoping just to hit land, runners with this one. I think mulliganing to 5 was kind of a death trap. Drawn to Searing Blood, not good. Could have played the Satyr around here, but the Satyr is not going to get through on this board. Opponent makes a 4/4. I suppose it was more correct to play the Satyr out, but I felt like, if I don't draw a land on the next turn so I get the Searing Blood online, I'm just going to lose. Because I missed this turn, I just go ahead and pack it in. I probably could have mulliganed down to 5 there, but Red Deck Wins on 5 is going to be really, really tough. This version of it does play a few more lands. I believe it's a 34 land version, or 34 land deck, which I think is about where you want to be. Maybe you want to go to 35, because if you get choked on mana, your cards are just not really good enough to kind of come back that much from behind. Really, you're relying on, your opponent getting mana screwed. If you get mana screwed, you're just going to lose, because, your deck's cards are not that good. I have Rift Bolts, the stuff like that just do 3 damage to face or to a random crappy creature, which at this point, Jiraga's Tree Speaker is not going to really, doesn't matter. They have a threat that makes threats every turn, so I'm just going to lose to that, and I go ahead and pack it in here. Alright, guys, quick pause, and we'll go on to the conclusion of round number 8 with Red Deck Wins versus Mono Green. Alright, guys, so this hand is great. We got Rampaging for RobZdar, which is going to be good. Play out Teetering Peaks. I'm not going to play a turn 1 spell, and it's more than likely that I'm just going to want to use Burst Lightning on turn 2, because I don't really have a great play. So if they play a Mana Dork like they do here, I think it's better just to do it on turn 2 or kill it on turn 2. But because I draw Goblin Chain Whirler, my hope was they would kind of play another, thing that died to it, but they unfortunately do not. But Chain Whirler does a lot of work there. It's just basically a free card. I miss land here off of the the Abbot of Carol Keep, but I do get to go ahead and Burst Lightning away their Fauna Shaman, so they can't find relevant cards here. I go ahead and Alpha Strike with both of these gentlemen. They go ahead and block with one of their lands, which I'm happy with because their lands right here are actually pretty relevant. I don't want them casting bigger and bigger spells each turn. I do get a Rampaging Ferocity down now, which means any Mana Dork, which they're currently just dumping onto the board, is going to cost them a life, and they're not going to be getting life back. They go ahead and just use the Channeler Initiate on the, or they put the counters on the Oracle of Multhia because they want a 3/4 more than they want the mana at this point. I do go ahead and attack with the 4/4, put them down to 7, and then my 4 damage burn spell with a rebound on it. Well, not for rebound, with Unearth on it, goes to the graveyard. They play on a Nissa here. Nissa flips. They draw a card there, which is interesting. I guess they couldn't really make a 4/4 because they would have just lost life. But they're at 6 life now. I just go ahead and cast Lightning Strike and cast Shard Volley, putting them exactly to 0. So that is the conclusion of round 8. Red deck wins versus Mono Green Ramp. Quick pause, guys, and we'll come back for the final round against another kind of interesting deck that I tend to enjoy. You may as well. Alright guys, back, and this time around we're playing 5-color Reanimator. So I'm kind of a jackass this round. I unfortunately keep this hand. This hand is not keepable, so Hermit Druid is actually a combo piece in this deck, but not in the way you'd think. It doesn't find any lands. So the way this card works is like you use a card like Worldly Tutor to find Necromancy, use a card like use a tutor to find like Goryo's Vengeance, Corpse Dance, you name it, and you activate the Hermit Druid and then use instant speed reanimation on an opponent's end step to bring back an Emrakul or a Gristlebrand or whatever the hell you want to bring back. Because there are no basic lands in this deck, it'll mill the whole deck, but because Emrakul's trigger goes on the stack, it'll reshuffle the whole library up. So if Emrakul's not on the board or in your hand, you can't mill through using Hermit Druid. It just gives you availability of all the options in your deck, but it cannot find actual land cards in this deck. So I should not have kept this hand. Another combo with it that I could possibly set up with this hand is I could use Worldly Tutor to find I can't think of the card. The 2-mana guys that are the 2-mana 1/1 that you can sacrifice to bring back a legendary creature onto the board, which does work at instant speed. And the name will come to me. I can't remember the card's name now. Loyal Retainers. So I do keep this hand slightly erroneously, but it's not horrible. Draw no Grimflayer, pretty much the worst draw. This is like a 39 land deck. It plays a lot of lands. So we should be able to draw out of this. We find an Exhume here, which is also not a bad card. Go ahead and pass it back. Opponent plays Intrude the Cowl. I make a joke here and say I had to remember because I told my opponent right away. I was like, I'm a jackass. I shouldn't have kept this. But I do go ahead and use Hermit Druid and recognize that, yes, there is indeed a Blightsteel Colossus and Emrakul in my deck. Draw well there and find a mana source that can actually allow me to cast Careful Study. So now I have availability of Exhume or Animate Dead to bring it back. Find Cephalid Coliseum here. Just go ahead and Exhume the Gristlebrand into play. I don't draw this turn because, there's a chance that they could possibly kill me some random way, like with Gaia's Cradle or like some other nonsense. They do get 5 damage in here because I cannot block the Vine Mare with the Gristlebrand. It is actually unblockable by black creatures. And then my opponent goes ahead and packs it in. Yes, the next turn I'm likely going to win just through the reanimation of the Gristlebrand alone. But this hand can also do some other busted stuff. Like, if we draw into what we need. Actually, what we're going to probably do here is Worldly Tutor to find the Loyal Retainers, play the Loyal Retainers out, entomb the Emrakul, and then just bring it back on their end step or sometime during their turn so that we can attack on the following turn with it, which is probably going to be good enough to end the game as well. So quick pause, guys, and we'll go on to round 2 of this final 9th match that we played against RobZdar in his testing series. Okay, guys, so this hand is acceptable. It's pretty mutable, so it's basically all tutors and mana, so I assume it's probably good enough. If I need to find an early Wrath effect, I've put some additional ones in my deck. I think I have Sickening Shoal in now, and there's Firestorm, Nahiri's Wrath. There's quite a few cards in this deck that deal with a lot of creatures all at once. They find a tireless tracker here, which is kind of bad news bears because it's going to be a card engine for them. I draw into a sideboard in Sphinx of the Steel Wind, but that's not really a great combo with Sneak Attack, so I'm not extremely excited about it. But if a Sphinx of the Steel Wind ever hits the board against mono green, you're probably going to win. It is beatable, like through like Craterhoof Behemoth, but most other cards are not going to beat it outside of Craterhoof Behemoth. Prime Time plus Merit Lage can also beat it because it just puts a 20/20 into play, which is just sheerly bigger than the Sphinx. I do go ahead and, with the Tainted Pact, find the Academy Rector. Pretty happy with that. But then I draw the worst card in my deck, which is Omniscience, because that means the Academy Rector, if it dies, finds something a lot less cool than Omniscience. But the cool thing here is that like my opponent, is going to assume that I don't have Omniscience in hand if I got Academy, or if I kept Academy Rector. They make a player here, and they openly admit it. They thought that was a Hallowed Fountain, when in actuality it was just a Flooded Strand, which kind of stinks because I do think it allows me to win the game here. I go ahead and cast an Intuition. What I select is Exhume, Gristlebrand, and Show and Tell to kind of obscurate what it is I want to do. They actually don't give me Gristlebrand. They give me Show and Tell in this game. And, yeah, I don't cast Gristlebrand. I cast a Show and Tell here. A lot of tutoring tends to break these replays, and we've done a lot of replays here. What ends up happening is we play out Show and Tell. They play a Regal Force. Regal Force draws them, 5 cards. We put an Omniscience into play. With Omniscience in play, I cast out the Sphinx of the Steel Wind, cast out the Dark Petition, find the Emrakul, cast the Emrakul off Omniscience, take a Time Walk turn, play out Sneak Attack, and then I believe Sneak Attack in the Academy Rector to get an attack in. When it dies, I'm going to find probably just Animate Dead. Animate Dead the Gristlebrand. This is all on this turn cycle right here. On the next turn, on my extra turn off of Emrakul being cast off Omniscience, I'm going to attack for well over lethal with a Gristlebrand, a Sphinx of the Steel Wind, and an Emrakul. Which is, that's pretty busted. So that is this deck. So, I did this this video for a couple reasons. One, you get to see a very wide section of the format because I played a ton of different archetypes here, all of which were, able to be successful. And I didn't want to show it because, we beat up a little bit on Rob here, but this is kind of how the format plays. And when you're going through testing or trying to build a deck, these are some of the archetypes that you need to consider as you're getting in. And it's been a long time since I've showcased some of these decks, and I kind of want to just go through and show how they played. Now, I've not done complete deck techs on all of these, but if you dig through the annals of a lot of the recorded material that I put up, you can find a decent portion of, I think, all of them. I think I've done deck techs on at some point in time. It may have been a year ago or so, but they're out there. But I think it was actually pretty interesting, and I admired Rob's dedication and discipline to follow through with the deck and kind of conduct this much testing on it. Because I think it's generally what it takes when you're trying to build a new deck. And mono green has not been a thing that's been showcased in a long time. It also kind of opened my eyes to some of the ban listing items right now. I do think that Survival of the Fittest could probably get back into the format to help bolster this strategy, although it's more of a rock card or a black green card. And also just kind of edified me. I do think that the green ramp deck does have some frailties. I think it's a relatively inconsistent deck, but when it has its best draws, kind of like Azusa or Nissa in 1v1, the deck is just unstoppable. But when it has an average draw against an interactive opponent or a broken style deck like this, then it tends to kind of just get run over. Because the individual quality of its cards, pretty strong at forcing through bombs, are not per se great. Oracle Moldite does not end the game fast; it just accrues value. Tireless Tracker, that card I will say does end the game pretty quickly. But Llanowar Elves and Elves of Deep Shadow, they're just mana at the end of the day. So if you have a big mana dead end kind of draw, which is kind of like the quality issue I'm talking about, then you can tend to just not really find what you need. So I do admire Rob's dedication to this, and Rob is a hell of a player, one of the better players that plays Hunter card. He has been over the last year or so that I've been hosting and playing in the format regularly. Habitually a white weenie aggressive player, and probably one of our best white weenie pilots. that plays the deck on a regular basis and also plays a lot of mono blue aggro control, Merfolk Fish. And you probably see him play against me in a couple matches. Actually, I think I lost to him in this last weekend's tournament on my blue-white control deck, but it's a pretty tough matchup. So I do admire him jumping into a new deck archetype and wish him luck with it. And I think he's going to get there because he's a hell of a builder and he understands the format very well. But again, this is the kind of thing you need to do is just go through and kind of try to pass the litmus test of the variety of different archetypes that are out there. Certain decks are going to have bad matchups, but it gives you consideration for, what could be out there and how you best plan or prepare for it based on likelihood of it being likelihood of it showing up. Now, for his case, I think, the most common archetype he's going to see from the meta that we have right now is probably going to be White Weenie, and I don't think that's a horrendous matchup. I think I got a little lucky to have some of the cards I had when I played him with my version of White Weenie. Although my version tends to be a little more taxy, it's more of a death and taxes list than it is just like pure White Weenie like aggro. But a lot of these other decks, I think the blue decks is going to tend to be not as favored against because unless you have a strong mana denial strategy going in with like cards like Dust Bowl Wasteland, Rashadenport. The blue decks will tend to beat the ramp decks because like I said, the quality, the overall. Not the quality, but the volume of cards that you must counter is not as high as something like a mid-range deck like 4-color Blood or like, an aggro deck like White Weenie, like where, almost everything will kill you eventually. Like the 1-drops or 2-1s or some of our 3 toughness, or 3 power 2-drops, etc. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. Got a very wide smattering of the format and kind of how some of it can play out. And I think it's a pretty aggressive pace. For a format that is essentially, commander without the commander. You generally wouldn't expect it to be this aggressive and this quick or this punishing, but I do think the format is one of the best ones out there. Very, very skillful and generally a lot to think about. So very thought-provoking games. That aside, I understand and also acknowledge the format can be a lot more expensive because it runs, some of the biggest staples of multiple formats, to include cards like Gristlebrand, Sneak Attack, Academy Rector's no slouch, not cheap, the fetch lands, the mana bases are just very expensive. But in general, I think the format is well worth the reward and the play experience that you get with it, despite it not being a high EV format and also a decently high investment cost. If you're playing Legacy or Vintage, and you have the cards available already, I strongly recommend it because the format's just great. And, I'm going to go ahead and cut it there, guys. I hope you enjoyed, again, this tour de force of the format of 100-card Singleton. And, hopefully on some Saturday you'll join us for the free player-run tournament, the Chainsaw Massacre, hosted by me on Gatherling.com. If you register on Gatherling.com, you can join the Chainsaw Massacre at 4 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Every Saturday. Free event, and there are prizings for it. Generally, it's pretty good. I think last weekend we gave about 40 ticks in prizes. I believe it was 4 Tundra, 1 Underground Sea, and 15 ticks. And bot credit from our sponsor, MTGO Card Market. All right, guys, going to cut it there, and enjoy.